Hi and welcome to today's video. Today's video is going to be nothing like you would expect. We're not even really going to talk about domain names. I'm going to talk about a personal story that I've been putting off for a long time that I wanted to talk about, and you'll understand why once I get started. So it starts with early on, my father knew that I'd be a good businessman, and here's why. One day, him and my mom were going out, and it was snowing in Toronto, and my dad would always give me a chance to earn a little bit of cash if he could. I was about 9 years old, and he offered me $20 to shovel the driveway. So I agreed, but it was Sunday, and I was watching football. And, well, I love football, so I was watching it. And suddenly, about halftime, a knock on the door came, and some kid came to my door and offered to shovel the driveway for $20. So I said, nah, I'll give you 10 bucks if you want to do it, but that's about it. Well, he took the 10 bucks, he'd shovel the driveway, and I continued to watch football. My dad came home and said, great job, son, and, well, I never said anything, and I did confess a couple years later. But from that point on, he knew that I was going to be a pretty good businessman. So today's video, the reason I told you the story about my dad is today's video is about a struggle I had to deal with, and I'm forever dedicated to those people that helped me out without really knowing how bad it was and how much they were helping me. So this is really a personal look into Adam Dicker, me. And the story illustrates while we're all domain investors, web designers, and SEO people, there is life outside all of this. People have real issues, and here is my story. I'm not sure I'm going to get through the video without tearing up. I did have to write the script down, a bit of a script for this one, because I didn't want to miss any key points or anything like that, and I have to admit I did have to grab a Kleenex 3 or 4 times, but I'll try. So I really never got to know my dad well until my 20s, as he was always working or busy, and he had a full plate of things to do. So from my 20s on, we became very close, and he was my best friend for the next 20 plus years. He even worked with me for 5 years full-time at my company where I was doing websites. He managed the office, and he was a great asset, a great salesman, and I really treasure those 5 years. So back in 2005, when my father and mother were on vacation in Florida, Miami, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor and was told if he flew home he risked death on the plane as it needed to be operated on immediately. My sister and I flew down there upon hearing the news, and we spent a month there with him and my mother so that we could be there for support during the operation. He had the operation to remove the brain tumor in Miami, and we were told the operation was a success. He had a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they told us that the tumor was removed successfully. While I was there, I confided in Jared Cohn, who was a good friend and later became a better friend, and I'm still friends with today. Jared took me to meet Rick Schwartz one day while I was at the hotel because I was there for a month. And Rick was kind and understanding because that's who Rick really is. And if you get to know him, you would understand that. Rick and Jared also took my mind off the situation, and we shared stories about domains with tips so that I could become a better domainer. I never forgot what Jared and Rick did for me, but they did a lot. So thank you, Rick and Jared. Having never been through anything like this in my world, seemed like my world was coming unglued, and I had no way to understand what would be ahead because it was only going to get worse. When it was time for my dad to go in for surgery in 2005, my mother and sister held his hand, and I said goodbye and turned away as I was reduced to tears. I didn't want him to see me like this. I was scared that this would be the last time that I would see my father, my best friend, so I slowly walked away after I wished him well in the surgery. I wanted him to have strength to get through the operation, strength that I was missing. He survived the operation, but the cancer returned in 2006-2007. He required numerous chemo sessions and radiation and took it like a champion until finally in 2008 he went through the last radiation treatment and said he'd had enough treatments. I was working at GoDaddy at the time. I was at GoDaddy for 4 years, as most people know. And on a flight back from Scottsdale, after I knew that he couldn't do anything and he was done with his treatments, and I felt helpless because I couldn't help him anymore, I suffered my first bout of anxiety. And upon sitting on the plane, I had panic attacks. And there was a nice woman sitting beside me. I looked over at her and I thought I'd better ask her for help because I thought I was going to faint. I looked over and she was reading a book, and the book was on serial killers, so I changed my mind and figured she's probably not the best one to look for support. Anyway, I struggled off the plane. I don't know how I made it off the plane, and before I got to the baggage claim, I passed out at the airport in Toronto. My wife met me at the hospital, and that was the beginning of a battle with anxiety brought on by the helpless feeling I had. I could do nothing except be there and watch him die. It's a helpless feeling, and I hope none of you ever have to go through that. He never told my mom and sister that he was in pain, but he confided in me that it was enough and that he knew he was never going to beat this cancer. I never said a word to my mom and my sister, but they'll be watching this video. Why would I want to take away their hope? I'm sure they knew in their own minds that he wasn't going to beat it, but they didn't need to hear it from me. The day before he died, I went to see him, as I did daily for lunch for the last few years, and I asked him, "Dad, do you know who I am?" He replied with a phrase that I'll never forget, that is glued in my brain like, "What is 1 plus 1?" He said, "Of course I do. You're my wonderful, terrific, hardworking, incredibly loving son." That was June 27th, 2008. And that was the last thing he said to me. On June 28th, 2008, he succumbed to the illness and passed away, with my mother and sister holding his hand the whole night until he died. I got the call at 5:30 a.m. to tell me he was gone. That was the beginning of a really tough time for me, but very few knew it, as I tend to keep things bottled up. People came to visit for the next 5 days after his funeral, but that did me no good. I lost my father and my best friend, and having people around only delayed the pain. Nothing could replace the loss. And till this day, nothing has. When they all left, it was time for me to bury myself in my work. This was what I did, and this is how I dealt with things. This was hard for me to do, and eventually I left my job at GoDaddy as a vice president of the aftermarket in January of 2009. And I was no longer the same Adam Dicker. My work hadn't suffered, but my personality had changed. I reached out to a good friend, Igal Lickman, who most of you know on DN Forum as Mrs. Jello. He taught me some new things and helped me stabilize my income, and he was always in the air for me to speak to. He understood. I am forever grateful for Igal for his caring and support that he provided me for the next 6 months to a year, and we will remain friends forever. I went on different anxiety medications, one that made me like a complete zombie. That was no good. That lasted a day. Another one that made it so it gave me insomnia. That was no good. I didn't sleep for 3 days and I was a mess. And then finally the doctor found the right one. The 6 months were really rough, the next 6 months were really rough, as I never left the house. I tried many times because before that my wife and I used to go to dinner every Friday night and even try to catch a 4 o'clock show. But every time I tried to leave the house, I'd get a block or 2 blocks away, and then I'd have a panic attack and ended up going home after getting only a block or 2 blocks away. I also had about 5 business trips to go on, and while my heart was in the right place, my mind wasn't, and I always ended up canceling the trips due to the anxiety. Then along came Traffic 2011. I was determined to go to this event because of the relationship with Rick, Howard, Barbara, Alina, that I treasure so much, so I made the arrangements to go. I told my wife this time for sure I was going and not canceling. Don't think she believed me. The morning came and I got dressed to head to the airport. To everyone's surprise, I went. My wife still admits to this day she expected me to call her saying I was on my way home. The call never came, and I went to the traffic conference. At that time, I had no idea that I was going to be inducted into the Domainer Hall of Fame at the conference, at that specific conference, but it was a nice surprise. And I also didn't realize how important going to that conference was for me to start kicking the anxiety that I was feeling. And neither did Rick, Barbara, Alina, and Howard. So thank you, Rick, Howard, Alina, and Barbara. You helped me pull out of the funk I was in, and after that the anxiety started to go away. I thank my wife Wendy for putting up with me for a rough year, as our life was really turned upside down as I went from a pillar of strength to one needing support and a good support system. She was and still is an excellent wife and supported me 100% when I needed it. I love her now and always will. We've been married for 19 years and have 4 beautiful children. I have to laugh because I now realize that all the future headaches I can see will come from the kids and not from Wendy. Also, I wanted to thank my sister and my mother for doing what I couldn't do, and that was for being the one to go to the doctor's office for every appointment, even when they knew the news wasn't going to be good. And they were by my father's side in the end when I was too weak to be. I still take off every day between noon and 1, and I go to my mom's for lunch because I cherish the time and the closeness we have developed since my father passed away. I also put up a website with a eulogy I wrote but couldn't say at the funeral as I knew I couldn't stay composed. I'll post a link to that website if anybody's interested in reading it at the end of this video. It'll be under the video on the page. It eventually got easier, so for anybody else that's dealing with anxiety, it eventually got easier, and it's true that time does heal. I feel much better today, but wanted to do this video, and not so people could say, poor Adam, because I'm not looking for sympathy, just so people could understand that there is life beyond domains, and we all have things and issues to deal with. So I leave you with this. Nobody on their deathbed ever said, I wish I had spent more time at work. They all say, I wish I had spent more time with the family. So do yourself a favor, cherish your parents if you're lucky enough to still have them, and cherish your spouse and your kids. Life is too short to sweat the small things. And I really mean that. So take the time and spend it with the people that you care about the most. Anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for helping for everyone who I mentioned in the video. And I may have forgotten a few, but thanks to everyone in the video who helped me get through this rough time. And I appreciate all the support that you gave me, and I'll never forget it. Thanks a lot.